The next bill on the agenda is House File 3548, the Farm Down Payment Assistant Grants. Chair Anderson, would you like to move your bill?
Yes, Madam Chair, yes, I'd like to move House File 3548.
Chair Anderson moves House File 3548 to be put before the committee. Chair Anderson, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been talking about this bill for a while, trying to make some improvements, and I would just tell members that this is kind of a work in progress. I have a couple of changes incorporated into this version, and we're still discussing and talking, and we are amenable to make additional changes. A couple of them that really jump out at me, looking back at the history of this program. It began back in 2023 with a $500,000 grant, and there was about $21,000 left over after that grant process closed. In 2024, they had $1 million to disperse, and about half of that got dispersed. And in 2025, they had at the disposal of the Department of Ag 1.4 million, and the total dispersed was less than half that amount, 615,000. And this year, we've increased the appropriation to 1.25 million per year. So there is funding there, and that's one of the reasons I've talked for a couple of years trying to increase the amount if somebody would purchase a larger piece of ground. And I think the awards that we give here should be somewhat proportional to the amount it takes to get into farming, which is what the purpose of this program is. And again, out in greater Minnesota, especially if you're going to be getting into grain farming, it's going to take a number of acres, and it's expensive. And to pick up a 40 or an 80 or a quarter section takes a lot of money if you're going to jump into it. And even if you're just going to raise some livestock, cattle or hogs, you're going to have land available to spread the manure with your manure management plan. So getting your land base is extremely important. And the reason in the bill I put 75 acres is, a quarter section of land is pretty common. It's a quarter of a whole section, which is 1 square mile. And an 80 is half of the quarter of 80 acres. But sometimes with land, there are roads that come out of that total number of acres. I have an 80, for example, that's got 77.1 total acres. The other 3 acres are county road. So that's just taken out of it. So my intent was if somebody was going to purchase what we would call an 80 acres of land, in some cases it may be a few acres less than that because of roads or whatever. So I use the term 75 acres to double the award that the recipient would be given. A couple other changes made in the program. Sometimes the applicants aren't totally ready. They don't have a purchase agreement in hand. And in 2027, we're going to reserve some of the money, about half of the funding, for those that have a purchase agreement in hand, so we can hopefully get more of this funding out to those that are more ready to use it when it becomes available, and then they are given an award. It also adds a little piece about requiring some knowledge of experience of agriculture. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be, but we want to make sure that if somebody gets a state grant and is going to get into agriculture, that they have somewhat of an idea of what they're getting into. It's right now anyway, it's a tough place to make a profit, but we hope that changes soon. So that's one of the additions to this bill. And there are also some about if it's zoned commercial, it must include a business plan, that type of thing. And if it's residential, it's ineligible for this type of a grant. So with that, Madam Chair, I don't know if there's testifiers, but I'll be willing to stand for questions, and would then like to hear what members have to say.
Turn it on, thank you. Representative Gottfried had a question?
Sorry, I did not expect me to go first, but thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a couple of questions about some of the changes. I think some of these make a lot of sense, but I'm just curious as to the rationale or how they're enforceable. So, I'm just for lines 1.19 and 1.20, that's related to has adequate farming experience or demonstrates knowledge in this type of farming, for which the farmer seeks assistance from the commissioner. I'm just curious what, how would they make that enforceable? What criteria is going to be used in order to demonstrate those knowledge? Is there going to be standardized criteria in as far as fulfilling this part of the requirements concerned?
Representative Anderson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good question, and again, a lot of that's going to be up to the Department of Ag and the Commissioner. One thing that comes to mind right away in some of the other programs, it's enrollment in a farm business management type program. So that would be one possibility. And then the others, I don't know if there's going to be some kind of a 10-point quiz, whatever, but just some basic knowledge of, I would say, economics of agriculture in terms of knowing what it takes to do a cash flow, that type of thing, in whatever they choose to get into, whether it be a grain operation or a vegetable operation here closer to the metro, just some basic background that they, that they know what they're getting into. But that's gonna have to be worked out, I think, in consultation with the department. I don't have that specific answer.
Yeah. Chair Anderson, will you bring your mic closer to you, please?
I
Thank you.
thought I was over-modulating, but yeah, I will.
Sorry, thank you. All right, Representative Gander?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the effects of this bill or this revision would be to create a greater advantage for small farmers, give them the opportunity to expand their acreage and a nice solid footing for a smaller farmer, again, to expand in a little bit greater scale. Can you tell us what are the benefits of that? What's the good thing that happens when a small farmer has the opportunity to expand? What good for the state, for the region? How is that beneficial? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair Anderson?
Well, Representative Gander, obviously there's a cost savings in size, but again, this program is designed mainly for somebody just getting going. So it's going to have to be at a smaller scale, but again, even at 40 acres or 80 acres, that's pretty small. So as you would expand, get a little bit bigger, it just becomes more efficient. Your cost per acre of production would be lowered, and not just in agriculture, but really anything, profit margin, whether at the grocery store or at the sporting goods store, whatever, your profit margin is pretty slim. So that's one reason farmers have gotten bigger, is that there's less profit per unit of production. So you have to produce more units to get that level of profit up there where you can survive. But again, this program really hits at the beginning farmer, the starting out farmer, to give him kind of a little jump start in getting his operation going, not necessarily to expand, but overall that would be the goal of anybody getting involved in business, would be to expand and make it more efficient.
Representative Gander,
Thank you,
follow-up?
Madam Chair. Thank you. So it's interesting to consider that even the great big farms have to be larger to be profitable. It turns out maybe even a startup farm has to be a little bigger, as even that initial launch has to be a little bit bigger to even get a good foothold. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Godfrey, did you have a follow-up question?
I did. It's okay that we
Sorry about
moved
that.
No, it's okay. Totally fine. Appreciate that extra context. I did also want to quick ask about lines 2.31 through 3.31, just to discuss the different eligibility requirements based on zoning. So if the farmland is located in an area zoned for residential use, they're prohibited. I was just curious if, I had two questions related to this, because it also seems in the same section that there is questions about the charter cities versus statutory cities. Is your mind, please clarify first, if you could, whether or not cities could make up their own rules pertaining to this if there's a residential zoning, within a city, could the city still allow for use of this program? Or is it that in addition to it having to be a commercial plot of land, and it also has to be, if it is in one of those cities, it then also has to be or earn at least $1,000? Or is it that if there's maybe some supremacy of the zoning, the particular zoning of the city over what is written here, that residential is ineligible?
Thank you. Representative Anderson?
Again, very, very good question. And this proposal here came from the department. I just as soon have somebody from the department come up here and to discuss their reasoning for commercial, residential, that type of thing. That came from the department. I suppose I would just say somebody in a residential area may maybe not appreciate some kind of a livestock operation in their neighborhood, but we'll let the experts talk about that.
Thank you. Please tell us, state your name and go ahead and answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and Representative Godfrey. So we actually, that piece didn't come from us on the zoning piece. But I did want to maybe go back quickly to your first question about how we will check farming experience. So we have our beginning farmer tax credit. We have a similar requirement. What we do right now is it is farm business management, as Representative Anderson mentioned. We also have like a 4-year degree in an ag-related field, or at least 3 years of verified farm management or working experience. So we've got a couple of ways that we check those things, but happy to talk more about that. But the zoning piece did not come from us, so I'm not familiar with that one.
Thank you. Representative Gottfried?
No, appreciate that clarification, especially about the former question that I had. I guess, for me, one of the things that I would be a little concerned about in this is, this particular bit about the zoning is kind of siloing urban agriculture, urban farmers from being able to take advantage of this program. And I, for me, as I talk about, I like to look at regional resilience and things like that. Obviously, we want to create opportunities for small farmers in greater Minnesota, 100%. But also we have, smaller food farmers that may want to do similar programs here within more residential areas as well. And I am a little bit concerned that, these specifically these provisions here might prevent those individuals from taking advantage of that, even if they, displayed satisfied all of the other requirements for the program. So that would be my only comment going forward. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Do you have an answer?
We'll get to the bottom of this. Your point is well taken. So we will find out. And if that's a problem, be willing to work with you and remove it.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. We have several people who wish to ask questions, but let's move to our testifiers. We have 2 testifiers here for the bill. Would you please come to the table, state your name and your organization, and then begin your testimonies, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, committee members, for allowing us to testify. My name is Laura Schreiber. I'm the Government Relations Director for Land Stewardship Project. We're a grassroots member-led nonprofit working to create a more sustainable and just farm and food system that works for both people and the land. As Chair Anderson said, thanks to the great work of this committee the last 3 years, we've been able to create and grow this program and have had 112 farmers be able to purchase their first farm, which is super exciting, especially when you're thinking about the average age of a Minnesota farmer is 57 years old. So how can we be supporting more programs like this that are supporting the next generation of farmers in Minnesota? We appreciate some of the suggestions that Representative Anderson laid out in this bill and have a few concerns as well. So appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation on this program. Firstly, we know that including some readiness requirements and ensuring that applicants are in a good place if they do receive grant award to be able to spend that money. So having that farmer experience is definitely something that we support, whether that be through on-farm experience, agriculture degree, or a farm business management course. And also set aside support having some of that money set aside for those who have a purchase agreement in hand. Instead of the 50% though for the second year, recommend 25% per year so that you can have that set aside, incorporated for each year. An area of concern, and I'll let Alyssa speak to this more, but first for the last year, the committee was able to successfully increase the grant award from $15,000 to $20,000. And then this bill, as we heard, would create another funding tier for acres or for purchases for 75 acres or more. Instead of having this based on acreage amount, we suggest setting this based on the purchase price of the land total, considering 80 acres in Pine County may be vastly different than say 40 acres in Renville County. So instead of having a purchase cap that can maybe go into that second tier for funding. And then lastly, for the zoning change, we understand the intent of this, but making sure that grants for land that's purchased with this is being utilized for agricultural purposes. However, this change could negatively impact farmers looking at land that's either closer to the metro or looking at smaller acreage. So I'll pass it to Alyssa, who's going to speak to that a little bit more.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. This is for the record. My name's Alyssa Isle, and I just spoke with Laura this morning. I run California Street Farm, which is a small vegetable farm in Northeast Minneapolis. And I've been running that for the last 4 years. We grow vegetables and flowers. And Laura called me this morning to ask me some questions about how this change of this bill would negatively impact me. And I was so worried about it that I drove here to talk about this. So I would say that essentially, I just want to give you a little background. California Street Farm is a vegetable and flower farm. And in 2025, we served hundreds of customers during our 25-week season at the Northeast Minneapolis Farmers Market and our on-site farm stand. In addition, we serve 105 families through our CSA program, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And in 2026, we anticipate serving over 150 families in our CSA program. Right now, I rent a quarter of an acre, and I'm able to serve that many people in the city. And I'm able to produce about $100,000 in sales from that land, selling just growing off of that quarter acre, and pay myself as well as 3 seasonal employees. So that is pretty small, and I can tell you that I've been able to do that profitably. Just to speak to this kind of like feeling or comment about like farms needing to be large in order to be profitable, I just don't think that's true, and there's many farmers that can show that that's true, or that it's not true, that they can be profitable on very small amounts of land. So my land that I farm on right now is zoned residential. And I would not be able to purchase it if this change were to be made utilizing the down payment assistance grant. So it definitely would have a negative impact, not only on urban farmers, but suburban farmers and anyone looking to buy smaller acreage in mixed use spaces. I was I called a couple of my farmer friends on the way in today and found out that they too are farming on residential properties and feel that it's already hard enough to find farmland to buy utilizing this program, and restricting it to agricultural only would just make it more difficult. So this program is a program that I'm hoping to take advantage of as I myself shop for land. I've been in discussion with an FSA loan officer as well as a land access navigator for the last 3 months, and I'm looking at purchasing about 10 acres in Buffalo. That the down payment assistance grant is an essential component to me being able to make that purchase, as I will be taking advantage of an FSA loan. And even though my farm is profitable, I don't have 20 grand lying around to put on a down payment for 10 acres. That 10 acres that I'm looking to buy is also zoned residential, and I'm able to legally farm on that land as it's residentially zoned, but wouldn't be able to take advantage of this program if that zoning requirement were there. I would also like to point out that if there's a change in language around, if there's more funds available to larger acreages, it disproportionately benefits larger acreage farms rather than smaller acreage farms. It's just gonna make it so that those of us who are truly, truly small, like 10-acre farms, are not able to take advantage of that money. But I do think that having more funds available to farms that are of higher value, that would be maybe closer into the city, could be something that could be worked in. Like I said, one of my friends who I called on the way in here, they run 10th Street Farm in Afton, Minnesota, and they serve hundreds of families in their area. They farm all year round, and they grow on simply 3 acres, and they're also zoned residential. They provided me a list of farms that I'm gonna read for you that would, not be able to take advantage of this program if the zoning restrictions were put in place, essentially. So those farms are 10th Street Farm and Market in Afton, Happy Song Farm in Afton, Rebel Pickle in Afton, Black Radish Farm in Minneapolis, Cimarron Community Farm in Lake Elmo, Edgy's Veggies, Freedom Farms, California Street Farm in Minneapolis, Vessel of Posies, Minneapolis, Julia's Neighborly CSA, Minneapolis, Northerly Flora, Minneapolis, Our Roots Garden, Minneapolis. And I'll say that I am very much in support of adding more readiness requirements for this grant program. When I think about that, when I come around to applying for this grant program this year, I will have been preparing for it for a year. I would hope that I'm in a lottery with other farmers who have been putting that kind of time and dedication in, who can show a 3-year cash flow budget to prove that they can actually afford their farm and make the money work. So I definitely support more requirements, though I don't support the changing of the zoning requirement or necessarily more funds going to larger acreage properties. So one suggestion that I have along the lines of prioritizing applicants that are more ready would be to require that applicants are connected to or in conversation with a navigator. There's land access navigators that are suggested through the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and they're grant funded. Those navigators can help farmers be ready and increase their percentage of actually being able to be ready and take advantage of these funds after they get them. So, thank you.
All right, well, thank you for the testimonies. Before we get back to our questions, does anybody here have questions for our 2 testifiers? Right, I'm seeing none. Thank you. All right, is there anybody else sitting here in the committee room who'd like to testify for or against House File 3548? All right, then we will go back to member questions. The next person on the list is Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And I didn't have a question for the testifiers, but I want to say thank you for presenting, especially since you were not planning on doing it till today. That was a great job, so thank you. Representative Anderson, or Chair Anderson, I should say, the intent of this bill, I think, as you presented it, I think we all agree with, making sure that this money is used to help folks either expand or get a foothold in a certain market. I do have some specific questions that were touched on by some testifiers in lines 2.23 and 2.24. Two specifically, and I would actually probably ask a question to the department as well if they're willing to come up one more time. I am curious how you came to limiting this to more than 2 acres just across the board. Why you chose that number for this bill, and then sort of a corollary question to the department is, would that restriction of 2 acres have affected folks who have received funds through this program to date? So that's a two-pronged question to 2 different people. Sorry for that, but I'd be curious responses.
Thank you. Representative Anderson?
I don't know if anybody's coming up from the department, but again, 2 acres was used. Keep in mind, there's a $20,000 grant, and I believe there's also a stipulation that the grantee provide several thousand on their own. So again, is this program designed to cover pretty much the entire purchase cost? I'm not sure that's true. And I would also make just one comment. I didn't think this program was entitled the Small Farmer Down Payment Assistance Program. I think we need all kinds of farming, agriculture, and to talk about, we don't want to help big farms or bigger farms. This should be for smaller farms. I don't think that's the intent of this program. It's to help all farms, all agriculture. And the 2 acres, again, was suggested as a nominal size. I think the smallest piece of ground purchased, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was 3 acres last year. And somebody's coming up from the department to answer that. But that's where this minimum came from.
Thank you. Can you please state your name for the record?
Hello, my name is Jenny Heck, and I am the program administrator at the MDA for this program. Thank you for the question. The average farm size over the last 3 years has been 60 acres. From year to year, I would say something less than 2 is pretty rare, maybe like once or twice a year. In the last 3 years, the smallest acreage was, we had 1 urban lot that was 0.12 acres, and then in the other 2 years, the smallest farm was 2 and 1.8 acres.
Thank you. Representative Smith?
I mean, so putting those 2 answers together, I mean, Chair Anderson, I agree with what you're saying of that in some ways this funds is good for all agriculture, but this bill doesn't say that. This says agriculture that's more than 2 acres. And we just heard that there's at least a couple who would be out of the program if this bill passed in that way, which you know, I don't think anyone would like to do. So I'll just leave it as I think we should take out that minimum, and we can talk about that. A follow-up question I would have to that is why the decision of acreage, using numbers of acreage rather than cost of purchase? Because as one testifier said, land is different all throughout the state. In some areas, 75 acres would be a certain amount. In other areas, it would be much more. And if you're even looking to help those larger purchases, you know, it might be a better way of looking at land as cost rather than simply number of acres. Again, you know, the old adage, location, location, location. Land is different where you're having them. So follow-up question with that.
Thank you. Representative Anderson? Representative Anderson?
Yeah, Representative Smith, Yeah, I can see that as a possibility that, land varies in cost, and I just asked if the entire grant covered the purchase price of these really small acreages, and she said, no, it didn't. So if it covered, I don't know, a percentage of it, but I'd still say it's a larger percentage than somebody purchasing 40 or 80 acres out in greater Minnesota. And I'm just trying to make the awards proportional, but I hear the 2 acre minimum, and that's fine with me. I want to take that out of there, fine. I'm not so concerned about that end of it. I just thought somebody who wanted to get some help buying a more traditional piece of ground out in greater Minnesota, it takes a whole lot more capital to get that 40 or 80 acre piece of ground, and that's what I was going by. But changing it to a dollar amount, yeah, if we can accomplish what we all want to get accomplished, yeah, I'd be willing to look at that, yes.
Follow-up, Representative Smith?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate that, and I think again, the intent of this bill, as you've stated, I think we're on similar grounds. And I know the testifier was from the city's area, but you're saying greater Minnesota, like my area of the state, right? Like outside of Rochester and Olmsted County, we have dairy farms, a lot of land that is much more expensive than agricultural land you would find in other areas of the state, but that are used for agricultural purchases. So I'd want to make sure that folks around there are also able to, if they're getting higher amounts of land, be able to access maybe higher funding in the same way that you're thinking. That was my focus there.
Thank you. All right, next on the list is Representative Vang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Anderson. I guess first question would be, what is the motion for this bill?
The motion is that it will be laid over.
Laid over, okay. And I just want to thank the testifiers and LSP for being here today and laying out some of the suggestions and concerns, as well as I know I have similar questions to what my members here asked too, and so that was helpful. So I don't really have any questions, and they've already been answered. But thank you, Chair Anderson, for bringing this bill forward. I know that this program has a lot of bipartisan support. There's a lot of interest in it, and that's what I've always appreciated from colleagues from the other side of trying to always improve on this program, because it's fairly new. And as you all know, I created this program. This is my baby. And when I created this program, I intended it to really help like the small and emerging farmers, particularly micro farmers too. In the MDA, in the ag industry, there's a lot of support for traditional ag, and yet for the micro farmers, it's almost pretty much non-existent. And so hence, this is why I came up with this program, is really to support the micro farmers, who particularly are the ones who are renting, leasing the land, and have spent years farming the land that they rent from, and wants to eventually purchase their first farmland to help sustain their business operations. And they're ready for the next step. And many of these times, I grew up in a Hmong immigrant community, and English is their second language. English is my second language. And you could think it's pretty hard to kind of do all the paperwork and whatnot. And so, although I appreciate that when you said that the language you have here in this bill is working in progress and that you're open to some changes, I do appreciate that. But with some of these changes that you suggest in the bill, it seems to open up to different types of farmers, which, as you mentioned. And I would just say that if we open up to the more, I guess, traditional type of farmers, they may not necessarily need this type of support. And if we do open it up, that it will create an already disproportionate advantage for the larger farmers to kind of take over the benefits of this program versus the micro farmers that actually need this. And that's just one of my concerns. But I'm happy to continue to work on this language with you if you're interested. And also just, I share similar concerns on how this could affect urban ag farmers too as well. And I'll just leave my remarks on that, but thank you so much for working on this.
Thank you, Representative Vang. The next person on the list is Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm in a similar boat as Representative Vang, where a lot of my colleagues are asking the same questions that I had. And I also want to thank the testifier to come up and kind of share her story, because the issues that she outlined regarding zoning and the minimum acreage are some of the same concerns that I had. But I want to go back and ask a different question about the minimum experience piece, because Mr. Chair, you kind of said that you didn't have a specific criteria that we're looking for. We heard from the department say that they had similar criteria in other programs. I guess then the one question that I would have for this is, was this change for the adequate farming experience a change that you were looking for, or is that a change like the department was looking for? Where is that request coming from?
Thank you. Representative Anderson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess I have to be careful of my answer here because I thought the other had come from the department as well. It was discussed, I think, when we look back at how much of the funding went unallocated. And there was discussion that some people kind of applied to the program and didn't have a purchase agreement. And then as it went along, they kind of lost interest and fell away, but it took time of the department, and maybe they had awarded them. So I think that's where it came from, and the department is here, and they can provide further clarification.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Frederick. Yeah, so we would be very supportive of this. I think as Chair Anderson mentioned, we are finding just as we've implemented this new program over time, we've noticed that there are some folks who are in the pool that maybe just aren't quite at the point that they're ready to get the land, and so it does take opportunity away from folks who are in a position that are a little bit more ready. So I think we were very supportive of the 50% for purchase agreements and for the requirements and related to what we have at the beginning farmer tax credit, just to make sure we're sort of getting to the folks that are at the most ready.
Follow-up? No follow-up? All right, great. Thank you. Next one is Representative Abaji.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, similar situation. A lot of my colleagues have brought up some of the same questions. I think one of the things, though, that is concerning me about the way this language has been put together is it kind of is changing the entire program. And so from what I understand from Representative Vang is like this was meant to be a program to support farmers who don't traditionally have access to purchasing land, that they are, renting land, they're using land that others have, or they're much smaller farmers that they would not be eligible for some of the larger programs provided by USDA or perhaps even in Minnesota that would allow them to purchase their land. I think as we heard from the testifiers, we also know that oftentimes a lot of these farmers are fruit and vegetable farmers. They may farm flowers. They may farm things that their community needs more so than grain, which I believe you alluded to earlier in your earlier presentation about the fact that this could be opened up to grain farmers. I would just say that as we're thinking about this or whatever happens with this bill language, to really just kind of initially keep that in mind of folks who do know about the land and folks who have experience on the land, whether it's people who are from the United States and have been growing up on farmland for their entire lives, or our immigrant communities who probably also came from farming communities too. And so that's just one thing I would hope that you would keep in mind as you go back to continue to rework this bill, to just keep that original purpose in mind. Again, I do also think too that some of the requirements also appear quite restrictive. I understand the need for a purchase agreement, but one of the things I'm wondering, because what we see in the housing space sometimes is you may not necessarily have that house ready to buy, but you kind of know, but you are ready to be a purchaser, right? And so trying to see if there's a way to kind of mirror that also in the same aspect with farmland too. Anyway, those are just some things I would ask that you keep in mind as you continue the drafting process. So as we're not excluding those who have already been excluded from farmland to the benefit of those who may have the ability to seek out funding, particularly from the U.S. government. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I think we need all types of farming, and what I just heard was, you're gonna open this up to grain farmers? I mean, grain farmers are farmers, like somebody that raises vegetables, and I don't understand why we would exclude somebody because of the type of crop they raised, and then with the realization that it takes a larger piece of ground to operate that type of a farm. And I would just suggest also, Representative Badger talked about if they're ready to purchase but don't have a piece of ground picked out, does that mean they've already got the financing lined up? They've got a loan ready to make up the rest? I mean, there's more to it than just saying, I'm ready to buy a farm and then go ahead and do it. There's a lot of steps involved in securing financing and whatever. And I don't want to, this does not hurt a small farmer, except the residential piece. Yeah, that will come out, because I've heard loud and clear that is a detriment, and I will take that out. But this doesn't, and if the 2-acre piece is too large, half an acre, whatever is satisfactory, 1/10 of an acre, that's not my intent to exclude anybody. My intent is at the other end, where somebody needs to buy 80 acres to have a chance to make it. And just because he grew up on a farm doesn't mean that he's going to get that land free and clear. I mean, it probably isn't. So there's challenges in beginning farming, whether you're in the metro raising vegetables. And I think in the tax bill last year, we just allowed somebody who raises flowers to be considered an agricultural operation. They can get ag homestead, which is good. It opens it up to more people who are involved on a smaller acreage. But my point with the increase, and we did increase it from 15 to 20,000. Chair Hansen, we worked on that last year to increase that amount to 20,000. And again, everything is based on the relative size of the money it takes and whatever. And I just want to make it so that anybody can have a chance to get into farming.
Thank you. Just a reminder, members, that we have one more bill to come up. There are 4 other people who wish to ask questions. The next one on the list is Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Vice Chair Harder, and thank you, Chair Anderson, for bringing this bill. This has been a great discussion, and I'm glad you brought it to the table for us to have this discussion. A lot of things that have been mentioned, I can echo as well. And one thing I want to hit on, and I hear a lot from, and I'm on a rural or border of rural metro community on top of that, but young farmers. And I appreciate the fact that you don't want to exclude anybody. We just want to make sure that we open the opportunity up so that those that apply are equally looked at. And if I remember correctly, we did this last year with earmarks. And we had several earmark things and nope, they're going to go to a grant program, which means more people have the opportunity to apply for it. So I appreciate that effort there as well. I want to go back and touch on, because a part that I think got overlooked a little bit is the part that Representative Godfrey brought up as far as the zoning use. I've had a chance to sit on zoning committees for many, many years. I think this is an important part that needs to be considered and included. I don't know if it's worded right. I'm not going to say, oh, this wording's perfect. But I do think in an application like this, we need to take into consideration, what is the zoning of the property that we're giving money to an applicant for? Will even agriculture, farming, flowers, whatever be livestock be allowed in that area. So there's some questions that have to be asked for that. If it's a piece of property that's commercial, that it can be, oh, we give some money out and 2 years later it's resold for double the price because it's gonna be McDonald's. Those are some questions that this section tries to deal with. And so I appreciate it being in here. I'd love to, work with the department to say, how does that need to be massaged to address those issues? But for especially somebody that's applying for this, to think through that process. What could this piece be in a year? Is a housing developer going to come in and want to put a couple more houses there? We want it to be for the long term. We want for the length of the business, the length of the farm, and make sure that those things are thought of as well. So just wanted to act you that this is important. It just needs to be kind of dealt with a little bit further. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Lawrence. Next on the list is Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Vice Chair Harder and Chair Anderson. So really, to expand on Representative Lawrence's train of thought here, zoning is there for a reason. And first of all, townships and cities, they all have the right to zone as they want to zone. And if you purchase a piece of property, it's really a contract between you and the government, and you're looking at that zoning, and you fully expect that you're not going to be subject to animal agriculture next door to you. So I think there's reasons for zoning, it's compatibility issues, and what could very innocently start as a quarter-acre produce farm, well, then they learn that maybe chickens work good, and pretty soon they've got sheep, and then they want to have pigs. And so now we've got an investment into a residential area with a ag property. I think there's legalities that the townships and the cities and their zoning laws, I don't think we have the authority, or I don't know whether that's your intent, is to create an authority that would supersede their authority. I think those are all questions that need to be looked at. When most people buy a piece of property, they expect that it's gonna be what it's zoned, and no one's coming in next door. I mean, if I wanna do this in the country, there's a 1,500-foot setback for me to have animals next to a neighbor. 1,500 feet's a long ways. So, I don't know if you've thought any of that through, or, I mean, you've said that you're gonna include residential. I think that's the wrong way to go. And the 2 acres then also keeps it more likely to stay out of a residential area if 2 acres were the minimum.
Chair Anderson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, those are good points. And again, using reason and common sense, again, mention of livestock coming into an area that is zoned residential. Those are all things that have to be considered. I did hear that there's concern about limiting some folks that may want to do some type of gardening in a residential area. And if that can be worked out with local administration, zoning people, I wouldn't want to stop that. But there are reasons for some of these things to be put in statute, and they're there for a reason.
Thank you. Next on the list is Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is more of a request for the department. Can we look at the data of folks who have applied for this program to really let us know, how many of them fit into the criteria that we're discussing right now with regards to being residential or whatnot, so that we can clearly see the picture or that the need that have been requested of the program. Thank you.
All right, the department has released a report that does have that data in it. Representative Lee. Great. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll go quick. Chair Anderson, we were so close on a couple tweaks to this last year that didn't happen. This bill goes much farther than the things that we talked about, where we had a couple of options. But I would state, I want to go back to, Representative Vang, that this was when it was originated, it was the Emerging Farmer Program. But apparently the words emerging farmer were too much for some, so there was litigation, and then we had to remove the words emerging farmer. And we did that so that the program could survive. The way that most people become an emerging farmer is they win the hereditary lottery and they're born into farming, or they marry into it. And now, in more recent years, maybe they have real estate that they sold and they can tax benefit themselves into buying some property. So other states, we're actually stronger, we are stronger than other states where the corporations have limitations on buying property. Chair Anderson, you and I could go to our FSA offices today and sign up for programs for trade adjustment. I think the money from the federal government is available today. It's probably going to be, we could sign up and it would be on a per acre basis. There are Minnesotans who don't have the access to those programs, who want to get in farming. And many of them want to produce food, and they want to produce food for their local communities. We are born with privilege, those of us who are born on farms, that we don't even understand because we have access to things that other people don't. And so I think to have a resilient agriculture, we have to have some of these opportunities to help people get into it. I think they want to. And to keep the culture in agriculture, we need to try to give some assistance there. And those of us who have, or our children, or grandchildren, or great-grandchildren who have that access, we have some benefits that other people don't. And to level the field, to give that leg up, to at least enter the system, I think is something that's worthwhile. And Representative Vang started that. I think we can continue to do that. It'll be harder with less money. But I think we need to keep a program going and try to make sure that it evolves to be beneficial for our state.
Chair Anderson?
Final comments, Madam Chair. The funding has increased up to 1.25 million. In previous years, it has not been allocated. And again, I'm not against anybody getting into farming. And the piece of this bill, I think, that gives some heartburn is that doubling of the amount to somebody who has to purchase a bigger piece of ground to get into farming. And again, I will listen and talk and work with anybody that wants to keep this program going and make it succeed for all of farming. And with that, that's my comments.
All right, thank you. House File 3548 is laid over.